guess we could just make this like maybe an hour if you guys want something short. I don't know, it's a small crowd. And mostly what we want to do is raise a couple issues about combating the far right in various forms and talk about tactics, talk about applying different tools, and create a kind of participatory discussion. We all just sort of have a powwow and a little workshop. And the idea of this is to create a wider conversation across more of the country, within the left as well. So we all come from different backgrounds. I come from sort of linguistics, language, culture, applied anthropology, and also military, something called special operations. Most of that was non-lethal information warfare. It sounds spooky. It's really not as bad as it is. But so basically, I'm looking at applying some of what they call counterinsurgency and the peaceful tools of how this can be applied in our own country, not through the government, but through citizen activism to try to defeat different types of political insurgency and also build bridges with people in the same way we did in tribal areas of, say, Afghanistan. Lee comes from a different background as well. He comes from secular activism. He grew up in the South. He fights for kind of separation of church and state. He could talk about his past as well. He's been heavily persecuted, you could say, for his lack of conformity to sort of deep South ideology. Mike is very seasoned in debates and logic and Socrates, as is Stephen, and all four of us, I hope, are. But he focuses on how we can better bring logic and reason and conversation into it. Stephen actually came from a very leftist background. He knows kind of the ideology inside and out, and he advocates for a more Socratic approach within certain circles. So we're all just going to talk for a little bit about that, and then have a little free-flowing discussion among ourselves. But it's a small crowd, so we can just do it along the road if you want. So we've done this on the podcast. We talked about everything from punching Nazis to what are the best tactics we can use. It might make more sense just to open this up initially to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 people, or 7. Yeah.
John, don't care about the crowd.
Okay. All right. No worries. So yeah, I'll take a few minutes to talk about my approach. So I think there are certain aspects of social activism is a broad term, but in general, I think that there are certain aspects of social activism that we have to openly talk about, possibly criticize, and try to really look at an evidence-based approach and say, does this really work? Is this really the best way to do it? And always be open to read, always be open to the evidence. So one approach I look at is distinguishing between your diehard radicals, the actual Nazis, the racists, the bigots, the hardcores that you really can't persuade, versus people that you may not agree with, but they're more in the center. They're mainstream Americans. You may not agree with them on everything, but you can reach out to them. And it's how you make this distinction, rather than saying everybody you don't agree with is a fascist, bigot, etc. How do you distinguish between your target audiences, and how do you bring out the tools of nuanced communication, emotionally effective communication, so that you can reach out into the countryside, you can reach out into different parts of America and effectively communicate and build bridges. So for example, people are struggling with how do you reach out into the more conservative heartland of places like Kansas, places like Georgia, or how do you then identify and understand people's vulnerabilities, understand why they're angry, understand why they do what they do, and how do you then communicate with them in an emotionally effective way? Hey, what's up? So one example is how do you get that sort of upper middle class white person who watches Fox News from his, living in suburbia in his echo chamber, rather than just categorically demonizing, how do you then get him to sit down and talk to someone who lives, comes from a different racial background, lives in, say, housing projects in Brooklyn, and then get them to humanize one another and really identify how they're both getting screwed by the system. And one common objection is that people can never understand the lived experiences of other minorities, and to some degree that's true. Even if these people can't fully relate to one another, they can still find common ground on ways that the system is broken. They can find a basis on which to talk to each other. And if we systemize this across alternate media platforms, across better ways to reach out into more of the country and more of the heartland, we can then work with people, even with conservatives, and try to drive a wedge against the extremism, against the bigotry. And so these tools of emotionally effective communication, these tools of multimedia platforms and ways to resonate with different audiences is very important. So we use this in Al-Anbar, parts of Iraq, and I wasn't personally in Anbar, I was in Baghdad and Basra, but we worked with some of the Sunni tribes and the tribal leaders down there in 05, 06, 07. We didn't always agree, and they didn't like us, but the idea was that we all hate Al-Qaeda foreign fighters. So on that basis, we found a way to work with people and find common ground and drive out some of the more extreme elements. In Afghanistan, we sit down and drink tea, sometimes with Taliban warlords, with tribal elders, with people, and we would find a way to have to sit down and understand one another, and at least understand how we can work together. If we can do that overseas, we should be able to do it in this country, and yet people won't even talk to their neighbors. So I'll kind of, that's my approach, and go into that, let you guys go around and talk about what you do, and go from there.
Well, I've got a slightly different approach from yours, a slightly different specialty. So yeah, my name is Lee Moore, and I am a professional atheist activist. I run several, I know, scary.
Yeah.
I run several groups here in the city that are focused on secular activism, atheist community building, and letting people know who don't believe in God that it's okay to come out, that you're among friends, no one's going to hurt you. You have a safe place. So we see the current crisis in politics as a direct war on the separation of church and state, which is something we're really big on. And a lot of times we've been asking ourselves, how did Pence get elected? Why is Donald Trump the president? Why is Mike Pence the vice president? These are huge issues for us because these two are leading a charge against the separation of church and state. So we look, we ask around, why did you vote for Trump? Oh no, we never voted for Trump. All over New York, nobody would confess to voting for Trump. So we talk to our friends in the South, where I'm from. My mother voted for Donald Trump. My mother is not a racist. She's not a misogynist. She's not a bad person when it comes down to it, but she voted for Donald Trump. And I asked, Mom, why did you vote for Donald Trump? Because he's God's chosen. Because the church wanted me and wanted us all to vote for Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump stands up for the church.
That's
He
what I
stands up
voted
for
for.
racism too.
Fair enough. So what do we do about that? What do we do about the religious bloc? That is where Trump's voting base comes from. That is why Mike Pence is the vice president. That is why we have the Congress we have today, is the Jesus vote. What do we do about that? My group seeks to educate people about reason and rationality, help them overcome, get out of the church environments, build your own communities, do things that are not bowing down to some preacher telling you who to vote for and how to live your life. Every last problem I see in our culture, when it comes to racism, when it comes to misogyny, when it comes to the separation of church and state and so on and so forth, these are all religious issues and all issues that religion is on the wrong side of. So I think we as a movement need to come together and work with an atheist cause. And I'll give it over to Mike.
I have a slightly different view. I don't see everything in terms of religion, non-religion. Both of my parents actually, my mom voted for Donald Trump also. And she is not completely racist, but she has racist tendencies. My dad, not racist, but he thought Donald Trump was going to be the person who would actually shake things up, unlike Hillary Clinton. That's not happening, but that's where people are motivated for. I think the problem with the rise of the far right and what fuels it is when you have a left-right divide that is so deep, where you have like this gap in between, and you don't have a rational middle ground. And I don't mean a centrist like Hillary Clinton. I mean when you have like a political and philosophical rational middle ground that is strong and politically organized, that can give people a rational middle approach to not having to choose versus the left and the right. Because when you have people in the center who look at the left-right divide and how deep it is today, if you, for example, don't agree with the left on certain aspects of, let's say, political correctness, but you agree with them on other issues, you're going to be more inclined to join the right. And there have been a lot of people who have abandoned the left or the center who have moved towards the right because of the different attitudes on the left on certain social issues. And so what I would like to see is left views on politics and economics mixed in with a more rational approach to many of our social issues these kind of divisive things that kind of divide people and make them choose one side or the other, because there are a lot of one-issue voters out there. And so if we had a politically organized center on that, people would not be able to choose the left and the right. And if we had a truly like a liberal, but like rational liberal candidate who can get people onto the left side, it would take away from the far right. Because what's fueling the far right is when people see this binary choice of I have to join the left. I agree with them on some stuff, but I don't agree with them on the other. Here's the right. I disagree with them on that. But the left, the mainstream Democratic Party today has gone very far into the corporate section on trade and on economics. And so Donald Trump, of course, he's a liar and he's not really going to do the things that he's going to do, but he ran to the left on trade and economics. And so people voted for him because of that. We didn't have a liberal candidate that was truly for liberal positions on trade and economics. And so that kind of divides people and makes people join the right. And so one other thing that the left needs to do, both politically and socially, is to make sure that we maintain a truly liberal position, traditional liberal position on trade and economics. Because if we don't have that, and if the alt-right tries to claim as if they're for traditional liberal views on economics, people are going to join the alt-right. Even if it's racist, and there's a lot of racists there, they're going to say, you know what? I can ignore the racism for the most part because they're on my side economically. And so that's one of the reasons why people are joining the right and the alt-right. And once they become part of it, and if they're just complacent in the racism that's going on in the alt-right, it allows it to happen. And so I think the left needs to get really, really back to its basics on a lot of the economic issues. That's a real reason why. And on the social issues, we need to not see this world in black and white. We need to realize that we can have political correctness, like a very basic kind of political correctness, but we shouldn't have a situation where if you don't hold the most politically correct position on every single issue, then you're a racist. That cannot be the conversation that we have with one another, and it cannot be the kind of groupthink that we have, because that's only going to lead to some really... People will look at that and say, I'm not down with that, I'm joining the alt-right. And that's what some people are going to do, and the left is going to lose people because of its failure to see nuance and compromise on that. And so, to counter the alt-right, we need the left to open up to many different shades of stuff on it. So that would be my point of view on countering the rise of the right.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with most of what Mike said. Steve Sharper. My background is mostly sociology and history, women's history specifically. I had wonderful professors who took me and mentored me and showed me a lot of the nuance in historical developments of movements and ideologies and social formation and so forth and etc. And to really for a moment talk about classical liberal values and where they came from, and the phenomenon whereby a lot of people who were very progressive until very recently have defected in order to take sides with people who are on the right at this particular point in history. I think back to the French Revolution, as there have been times where I've struggled to define myself politically, and even times where I question, where I've seen doctrine become dogma and dogma become dangerous, whether or not I really want to be on the left. And the way I have a tendency to think of it is those who initially set to the left of Louis were those who wanted constitutional democracy, or at least a constitutional monarchy. Those who sat on the right wanted absolute monarchy. And that's at the beginning of the French Revolution. Now, at no point in history, if I had the mindset that I have at this moment, would I be in favor of absolute monarchy. So that to me was a sign that I am not on the right. I would, at the beginning of the Estates of Realm or Constituent Assembly, have been on the left in the beginning. But that is a time period in history in which the left very quickly went from embodying Enlightenment values to utter chaos, and eventually devolving into the reign of terror. Now, I honestly in my intellectual opinion, don't see that being reproduced in full in 21st century America. The technology is different, the power of the state, the military, surveillance. We have a very different scenario going on in any number of ways. But at the same time, as a student of history, I understand that circumstances throughout history are relatively, for lack of a better word, static, insofar as we see history repeat. And we're at a point in American history and in Western history in general where I am seeing a lot of things repeat. I tend to think that millennials are going through a phase where they're trying out things that their baby boomer parents tried out in the 60s and 70s. And some of them were effective, some of them were not so effective. And if the left as a movement is to move forward, what we need to do is learn from the mistakes of the past and move forward and not repeat them. Unfortunately, I don't believe I'm seeing that unfold on college campuses or in political debates, conversations among pundits on television. Is what we are again seeing is a deep polarization that I think is not unprecedented, but is worse than it's been since the Kent State shooting. And what I do not want to see is another Kent State shooting, which seems inevitable at this point in history, with the type of damage and destruction and unruly behavior that's going on at our college campuses across this country. So I think to myself, where are we in between the initial state of the left and the French Revolution in the reign of terror? And again, I don't think we'll get to the reign of terror, but I would rather steer as far away from that as possible. And to stick to the topic of countering the far-right insurgency is that when the left has allergic reactions, I would say, to systemic injustices, because there are, I believe, a set of appropriate reactions and then there are allergic reactions. It causes the right to also have allergic reactions. And those allergic reactions are manifested in the rise of the alt-right, in the manifestation of a resurgence of white nationalism, which I was hoping would be left with the little slight surge in neo-Nazi activity among Gen X back in the 90s. It's manifested in the election of Donald Trump, with Mike Pence as the guy who will take charge if Donald Trump has a heart attack on the green one day. How can we, moving forward, try to have a conversation that does not embolden those that we cannot, on the far right, intellectually engage with in any way, Steve Bannon? And how can we not have a conversation that will tempt, if you will, certain people who are otherwise good-hearted, good-natured, concerned citizens of this country that we share, not tempt them into indulging in and entertaining the ideology of the alt-right, which has something that it is marketing to American voters. And I don't want the entire conversation to be around electoral politics, because I think that politics is deeper than that. But at the same time, electoral politics has to take, I think, front stage, because we have a president who just backed out of the Paris Climate Agreement. So we're talking about the future of the human race. We're talking about the future of political discourse. We're talking about the world that we want our children and children's children to occupy. And I've been trying to trace this phenomenon historically, and to conclude, I generally tend to think that the right fires the first shot. If the French aristocracy had not starved people, there would not have been a meeting of the states of the realm to begin with. And if the Republican voter base did not have such an allergic reaction to the election of Barack Obama to the point that they created the Tea Party, I don't think we'd be seeing what we're seeing in this destruction on college campuses. So I look to, of all people, well, not of all people, but more than Barack, I look to Michelle and her statement that when they go low, we have to go high. Because trying to engage in a competition with right-wing ideologues in terms of who can be more destructive, who can be more vitriolic, who can cause the most controversy. First of all, you can't win it when you have a president who has the intellectual capacity of a 5-year-old and an addiction to Twitter. You can't win that conversation, that contest on any grounds. They have more power, they are more destructive, they have a hateful ideology. And what I want to focus on is how can we avoid the trap of ideology that convinces us that we have all of the answers already, that all of the answers were figured out 150 years ago by Karl Marx. Now, Karl Marx has a brilliant critique of political economy, of bourgeois capitalism. However, he did not have all the answers as to what we are to do to solve it. So moving forward, we have to know, where are we intellectually and emotionally? You know, is our heart in this battle? Do we care? Because I think at some point we have to look to people like King and Tolstoy. Do we have the compassion for our enemy? You know, do we care at all about, and sometimes it can prove difficult. I mean, some people have effectively committed suicide by voting for a party that took away their health insurance. But do we have compassion enough? Do we have intellect enough to move forward in a pragmatic fashion that will allow us to solve political problems in the immediate future and in the long-term future? Then, you know, that is why I'm still on the left. That is why I'm here at the Left Forum, and that is why I'm participating in this conversation.
If anybody wants to talk, has any thoughts on this, I just want to say real quick, I want to make it clear that this is not to excuse or in any way endorse some of the vitriolic behavior of the Green Frogs. I mean, this is not to say, people often hear these arguments and they say that we are apologists for the racists, that we're excusing people going to the alt-right. It's not about so much excusing that action. There's no good reason for someone to jump onto, you know, that side of history. That is not something that I'm, you know, trying to excuse away. I think what matters is understanding it. And what Steve's talking about is something called reciprocal radicalization or echo chamber reciprocity. This has been increasingly researched by fields like moral psychology, cognitive science, studying echo chambers through social media. What it means, it's like a pendulum effect. People double down into their bubbles, into their filter bubbles, into their echo chambers. It often happens online, but it happens in real time. So the more you get someone turning Berkeley into a 1980s Kurt Russell movie as a way to shut down Milo, which I think is an absolutely horrible idea for many practical reasons we can talk about, that then empowers and emboldens more fanaticism on the far right. And this just keeps a vicious pendulum swing going, while most Americans really are in between the two extremes. And it is those people we have to know how to reach, and we have to find better ways to engage mainstream American populations across ideology and across race. And if we don't do that, we are fucked, I think, as a society and possibly as a species. I mean, if you look at a heat map, if you look at an overlay of red states and blue states, look at where all the guns are, you might want to do what's called a predictive analysis, kind of a second, third order effect analysis of trying to go around punching people for wearing Trump hats. That may backfire. There may be better ways to distinguish who you want to go after. And then there may be more practical ways to have this conversation. You know, I saw someone earlier wearing the Antifa t-shirt. I think they've gotten fitted to the left, I'm not sure, but Antifa is someone we need to be talking to. I understand where they're coming from, a lot of things. A lot of their tactics, I think, are suicidally stupid. That doesn't mean they themselves are bad people. I would talk to an Antifa person, I'll talk to someone on the, you know, at a GOP rally, I don't care. We have to understand how we can better influence people and create a better war of ideas. On that note, if you guys want to open this up and talk about it, what you agree with, what you don't agree with, what are the obstacles to trying to move forward and build a sort of a better playbook. And, you know, any thoughts, let me know. My whole idea is to encourage a wider conversation within the left on how we can deploy some of these tools and maybe avoid some of these mistakes. So.
I'd like to just simply say that not having access to Fox News, you know, the ability to speak to a huge amount of people all the time, to press their buttons so that they're constantly anxious and scared and, you know, hateful, it limits the left a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, there is no equivalent. There is no money funding to put together anything like that. There is no expertise. I mean, that money hires expertise, and it hires talent, and it hires, you know, all of the media consolidation that has been allowed to accumulate. And so you're coming at this with a plastic knife through a bazooka fight. I mean,
right.
I don't see where, you know, you can talk to individuals, and that's great, it's a good idea, but At this point in history, I don't hear anything amongst you guys, sorry, that really is going to make a difference.
Well, let me ask this, because I actually agree. I think we desperately need the billionaire class and the multimillionaire class, the ones that are socially concerned, and they certainly exist. People like, there's obviously Bill Gates, but there's a lot of names out there. What's his name? The guy who did the TED Talk. I'm having a brain fart right now.
Elon Musk?
Yeah,
Musk or?
No. Well, Elon Musk, obviously. The guy who did the TED Talk on, founded Amazon. What's his name?
Bezos, yeah.
That's another guy. It's totally escaping me.
Oh, yeah, the guy with economics.
Yeah.
The guy from the place with the
The
thing.
guy from the place of thing.
He was an investor. He was an early investor in Amazon, and he's like a huge multi-billionaire now.
Not
Peter Thiel,
Peter
no.
Thiel and Weinstein. So another guy did a TED Talk on inequality. He's saying he's a billionaire, invested in Amazon. He's saying we need to address inequality.
Are we not talking about inequality?
Yeah, let's get actually. I think that is a seriously.
Well, I think we should really address the gentleman's point.
Well,
Yeah. Well,
even Buffett and
Yeah.
Bill Gates have said.
Well, real quick, I think we need.
Well, is your point that the left doesn't have the equivalent mouthpiece of something like Fox News, and that it should,
Yeah.
or that it shouldn't because it would be dishonest because like they lie
I'm
or
saying
what?
that if you want to reach the people of the United States,
Yeah.
you need the tools and the
I agree.
expertise and the talent.
I'm actually writing a book on this. I think we need to have a well-funded, multifaceted media and outreach platform that's based on intellectual honesty.
Do you have
that's
one in
based
your
on
back pocket?
He's got you there.
No, that's the thing. Like, this is something we have to get investors to invest in. We need a new. So
But it's against their interests. The right functions as the right because we have a corporatocracy.
right.
Okay, they're not going to just give it to us because we're nice guys.
Not the ones that.
I mean, well, look at our current politicians. Look at the Democrats that you can see. They're only the ones that are more open to the corporatocracy are the ones that are getting funding.
Nick
so.
Hanauer's the name I was thinking of. So there are people that are multimillionaires, even some billionaires, that are legitimately concerned that do want to see better. They want to see more inclusion. They want inequality to be
They're
addressed.
told in like the self-interest.
Yeah, sure.
They're like,
Well, we all act out self-interest. We're, our brains evolved to try to, reciprocal altruism. we can. I
there
genuinely
actually
do.
is altruism.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree. I genuinely think people can move beyond their limitations and care compassionately. But even if it's driven by selfishness, there are people with money that are willing to invest, but they don't know where to do it. They don't these mechanisms. So here's my analogy. For the last 30 years, there's been a vicious propaganda playbook of divide and conquer. Well, it goes back to pre-capitalist serfdom, but pitting poor whites against poor blacks, the Southern strategy, all that. There's a lot of research behind it, and I have a background that allows me to understand this propaganda. It's soul crushing. I hate it. I want to find a better playbook. I want to use the same science of psychology and media and stuff like that to build a better way people can talk to each other with the opposite effect, a science of unity, a science of coming together, a science of getting people to humanize each other and expand their circle. And there are people that would invest in that. We've got to start presenting smaller projects and going bigger. And you're right, without that kind of capital.
I was just saying that, you have these competing echo chambers and bubbles.
Yeah.
You do,
And
yeah.
The question is, how do you
Break them. Yeah. Well, one of the things is we have to start talking to the other side. And we can't dismiss the other side as you disagree with me on X, therefore we're not going to talk to you. Well, we have to generate a mentality among people on the left and the right that says, hey, I should go out and talk to the other person that disagrees with them. Me personally, for example, I love being in a room with people who disagree with me. I find it boring when I'm in the echo chamber. So I go out and I talk and I debate with a lot of libertarians who I disagree with strongly on economic stuff. And I go out and I engage with a lot of conservative, religious people who I disagree strongly with on a lot of the social issues. And I love being in the lion's den. But that's because I like to debate. A lot of people aren't like me, though. A lot of people do not like ideological confrontation. They like the safe space. They don't want to be in a place where their ideology is being strongly picked apart by a room full of lions.
Thinking makes their heads hurt.
Yes. That we need to generate. We need to push people out of their natural safe spaces and say, hey, look, go engage with people who disagree with you. Sit in a room with four conservatives.
No.
Going to their barbecues?
Not at all.
No, well, we do have a site called Meetup, which allows you to go to different meetups based on different stuff and go to one that has a political discussion, or if it's conservative, be the token liberal liberal there and go there and cause a stir. I do that all the time. And I get people to change their minds on certain issues here. I may not have moved them from conservative to liberal, but I've gotten them to, on, let's say, one or two issues. Now they're not conservative anymore. Now they're towards the center. And that's progress. And if nobody engages at all, no one's ever going to move
Also,
at all.
there's a lot of good tools through emotional effective communication and moral psychology. How to build rapport on an emotional level, find common ground first, then you redirect it, and only then do you start talking about politics. And there's ways to do this, and most of the time that doesn't happen. Most conversations on the basis of tribal, my team against your team, on an ideological sort of
Most
binary.
conversations are transactional.
They don't really work. If they're a binary of me versus you, red tribe and blue tribe, those will fundamentally fail. And most of our political conversations have been a failure. And I think there's a better toolkit. We have to start bringing this into effect. And there's a lot of ways to reach people besides just knocking on doors. But one example is creating alternate exchange spaces on campus. What do y'all think of this? Just an open question. Can we have a better way for people on college campuses to sit down, understand and humanize one another, start to respect people with different lived experiences, and find better ways to have dialogue? And is an alternative, get some people from the student Republicans to talk to the liberals. There are ways to do that we're not currently employing. And a lot of people on campuses have been really receptive to this. People at NYU, people at Columbia, some of them are suffocating right now because of the tripwire atmosphere that doesn't allow them to talk. They're hungry for a better way to have discussions. And that is how we could have beaten Milo. I mean, the whole playbook Antifa uses could be massively rewritten and improved, but to even have that conversation, you'll get shut down. They'll say, you're a white male and you have genitals, therefore be quiet. Now, there's ways to respect the fact that people... Yeah, no, and there is
External genitalia.
Yeah, exactly. And there are times when myself as a white male, I will shut up and I listen. And I think most of the time people should listen when other people talk. The point is we have to be willing to question leftist dogma. No dogma should be able to be above scrutiny. And there's people that are not willing to question leftist dogma when it comes to tactics. That is running us off a cliff right now, I think.
What do you mean by tactics?
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Sure. So
what do you mean by tactics that we can't get into criticizing the left?
Sure. So, and I think most people on the left are willing to. I think there's a more loud faction that doesn't mind. So, for example, I don't think this is most of the left, but there's a panel I have tomorrow on dialogue with police and communities. There's some ideas that you have to categorize things in a black and white way, where someone who is seen as working for an oppressive system, like police, for example, they'll say police have the role of maintaining white supremacy, maintaining an oppressive system. Whether or not you believe that, their point is basically that if you work for an oppressive system, you are the oppressor. Or if you vote for the oppressor, you are the oppressor. Step two is they'll say, we don't talk to the oppressor. Therefore, I write them off as the enemy and I otherize them. Therefore, fuck the police. Therefore, try to use that tactic. That's not to say there aren't times to sit down and protest and get arrested and things like that. But that is a very black and white approach. I call it the Anakin Skywalker fallacy. If you're not with me or behind me, that is considered dogma by many people I've talked to. There's the idea that anyone whose speech might be considered hateful, people like Ben Shapiro, should be shouted down and physically driven off campus where people block fire exits. I mean, that actually happened. And when I've questioned that, people will then call me a Nazi sympathizer. I mean, this is really happening. And so those are examples that we could question. Another example of dogma is don't talk to conservatives, they're all bad. Well, there's a much more nuanced way to approach talking to people. I think most people on the left tend to be receptive to this kind of intellectual diversity. I really do. I think the left is way over demonized by Fox News and the right. But I think there's still some dogmatic thinking at the forefront of social activism in some circles that we need. One last point is I was observing the Donald Trump protest on Inauguration Day. I saw the tear gas, I saw the cops, I saw the smoke bombs, people running into the bathroom to get tear gas off them. Starbucks, Bank of America, they were all smashed, right, by Antifa and black people. So there's people that will literally tell you it's okay to smash cars. You could be a working class mother of 30 who now has to skip her child care payments to fix her window. Who cares? We'll smash cars and break things. There are people that believe that. We have to question that.
Dude, breaking things is fun.
It is, yeah. Especially if you're at a concert too, you know. But what do you think about the idea of
I agree with what everybody's saying, and I think another aspect to look at is that the overall culture atmosphere that we live in is working against us because we live in a capitalist, materialistic society where 1% of the people have 40% of the wealth and they don't want to lose it and they're gaining more and more, and it doesn't seem to be reversing in direction. And so there's a book called Dark Money. I don't know if any of you have read that, but it kind of explains how people like the Koch brothers basically can make almost anything happen that they want in this country.
I need to read that.
Yeah, it's a good book. Another one is by Neil Postman called Amusing Ourselves to Death. So we're up against that too, where most people don't come to things like this and they don't want to think. They want to be maybe in church or somewhere else where there's someone telling them what to do. There's a lot of people like that. And the more you watch TV, the more your brain turns to mush. And corporate TV is designed to do that. And this book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, basically shows how, people are spending almost all their free time watching TV. We can't expect to even reason with them. And if half of them are watching Fox News, we might as well almost give up. So, we were working against the culture and the capitalist economic system, materialism. All the advertisers, they're financing these ads, and they have psychologists, like we were saying, that understand exactly how to brainwash everybody to make everybody not want to have anything to do with politics and just want to go out there and buy the new cars. And
George Carlin had a great rant on that.
And so, we're working against a lot, and all the money is allowed to influence our elections more and more now too.
It's a big problem. Lawrence Lessig's TED Talk, actually, this one TED Talk I teared up on, it's really, he sums it up. We have to fight for our republic against the role of money. Have you seen the show Keeping Up with the Kofe Phase? It's a new series.
I don't have a TV. I got rid of my TV about 30 years ago.
That's smart,
And I
man.
advise everybody to do that.
Right there with good. Just throw it out the window. Yeah.
We gotta play video games on something.
Well, the Fox News ship seems to be sinking, which is good, and MSNBC is rising, but they're still very corporate. They're just the liberal. They're corporatists who are just liberal on social issues. So they're better than Fox News, but if you want really good kind of news, you're really going to have to go to the internet, and the internet is winning, and TV as a medium as a whole is in general dying. So that may be a good thing. However, the problem with the internet is that it just appeals to echo chambers. It just cuts all the society up into little slices, and then here's your media, and here's your media.
Yeah.
And in the long run, that may actually have an even worse effect. So I don't even know what we're going to do.
It also deprofessionalizes.
Yeah, and you also have a lot of people like Alex Jones just spouting nonsense who are able to get audiences without being fact-checked whatsoever. So you have that problem as well.
Well, that's because you work for the global elite.
So I'm a big NPR listener personally. I love public radio, and they're not beholden to any corporate interests, obviously. And so they can really dive into all different topics, and I think it gives you a vast variety of genres and things like that. So is there a way to utilize, I know radio is kind of a dying, source of information and entertainment, but is there a way to revitalize that type of a platform, on the internet? But here's the thing, they still have journalistic integrity, right? We know if you hear it on NPR that they've done their research and that it's well sourced. Whereas I think a lot of the stuff on the internet, you just don't know. And who has time to dig that deep,
You're bringing up a big problem we have with the podcast world. Everyone these days has a podcast. There's so many podcasts that you'll never be able to listen to. If you started right now listening for the rest of your life, by the time the day is over, more content will have been created than your lifetime will be able to hear. So there's this big issue, what should we listen to, what's worth hearing? And there's no program that's come out, no certification panel. There's just too much content to police, too much to review, too much to fact check, and it's just going to get more and more exponentially crazy like that, to a point where really there's nothing we can do about that. There's nothing anyone can do about it.
Everybody wants to talk and nobody wants to listen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, there's democracy now. That's
Never heard of it.
Really?
It's
Oh, they're
completely
Amy Goodman.
funded. They have no
It was a joke.
promotion, no ads.
Democracynow.com, right?
Yeah.
What?
Amy Goodman.
I've talked to that crowd about how they can expand some of their messaging into the heartland, get conservative people to listen to Democracy Now! It is possible. There are ways to do it.
The thing is that there are
multiple outlets, not just internet, Facebook, venues, or whatever that we're snowballing into. There's the real news, there's like Democracy Now!, and there's also another option to also just broaden your horizon and read multiple different outlets and then make your own opinion.
Oh, yeah.
But who actually does that? That's the problem.
The thing is that when you're pressed against like an economic collapse and social issues, and then this anger and this like, kind of reaction to the latest, like the rise of Trump election and everything, you're seeing a lot more people, not just from the left, like trying like actually challenging what they took for granted for 40 years. So the thing is that yes, we have a lot to go against. We have capitalism and corporates, and no matter how well-intending and how great of a speech like a billionaire gave about inequality, at the end of the day, it's still part of the few and part of the problem. And I'm not saying that they're not redeemable, but I'm just saying that if anything, like the Bernie Sanders campaign proved that by having small donors, if you corner the main issue that most of the working class and Americans are having, instead of talking about ideology or about, like, instead of trying to move them from their ideology, you just talk about very specific policies, very specific
Common
problems they have.
Yeah.
And even, it can even be as like large as like Bernie said, like Wall Street or anything like that. You have to corner it into one thing that a lot of people are starting to figure out, that there is an elite, there's too many, like too few people, the same way that the French Revolution happened, the same way that every oligarchy like fails. So we're at that breaking point now. The problem is that we can't, like, we're bound to kind of repeat the same thing if we talk about having centrists, like focusing into bringing Republicans into centrist ideologies, or trying to compromise, like finding the right person that, you know, like sounds good because they appeal to both sides, instead of like having a like stand, not radical, just like a stand. Like it's not radical to say that you want universal healthcare. It's not radical to say that like these are not radical things or new things. These things have were here happening for years. So it's not anything new and it can be done. But also, I just wanted to like go back to one of the things that you said about how we can have conversations with like people who disagree with you and just like use reason and rationality instead of the only thing is that the fundamental problem is that emotions cannot be just dismissed. It cannot be analyzed. It cannot be can have a data. Same way that you can't have a poll on religious like values and then use that as a fact of like contributing how they
Well, I think
see themselves. So it's just like there's a fundamental problem with like just only using science, data, and reason and talking about a very social problematic.
Well, I think you need both pillars. I think you need, human connectivity, you need emotionally effective communication, and a lot of these emotions are not accessible to you because you're a different person. So I think primarily, you heard the elephant, the rider theory, we tend to arrive at things for human emotional reasons, and then our reasons follow. We rationalize after the fact, in general. So we have to connect with people primarily on an emotional level. We have to learn to be empathetic listeners, and we also have to realize we're not going to relate to everybody. I don't think everything is empirical, dry data. So one analogy I use is Star Trek, right? You got Spock, who's a Vulcan. That could be hard science and data. Then you got Captain Kirk, who's, say, on the emotional side. You need a Dr. McCoy approach. He can be a bridge between both. So I think there are good times for reason and rationality and science. There are also times to connect as a human being. I think you need both pillars. And I agree with you. And I think if you categorically dismiss one or the other, I think we don't have a full package. And I think we need both to bridge the gap. Yeah, sure. Hey.
Hi. I just wanted to say that when you watch Democracy Now!, just watch Democracy Now! With some reservation. And why I'm saying that, I have to give you facts in order for me to say that. And it's like at any other side. Yes, I still watch Amy Goodman, but Amy Goodman was one of the biggest cheerleaders for the invasion of Libya. And she had been doing the same thing to Syria. I remember one of the girls who used to work with her And on December 17, 2011, when the Occupy movement was trying to get Duarte Plaza on Canal Street, I was there, and I went and I confronted the girl and I said, how come you on Democracy Now!, you and Amy Goodman only showing one side of what's happening in Libya? You only wanted to be with the rebels and only talking about the rebels, and you don't want to show anything else. And that is what Amy Goodman is doing right now with Syria. About 3 weeks ago, almost a month ago, she had 3 people supporting the rebels in Libya. And if you don't believe me, you could go back to her show and see these people that she had at her show. Never having anybody to come and talk about the other side.
Right.
It's not that I support Assad, but you have to talk about both sides.
Right. I remember she had Viggo Mortensen on one time.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. I still watch her because she does bring a lot of things that the other channel they don't bring out, but you have to watch her with reservation and do your research.
I'll look into it.
You have to watch everyone with reservations.
Yes.
Syria is a complicated issue. It's Syria is more complicated than Iraq.
Yes.
And it's an issue that kind of divides the left. There's no, the left was, for the most part, united against the war in Iraq. But when it comes to invading Assad, I see people on the left supporting the invasion. I see people against it. It's like Iraq times 3 in terms of its complexity and stuff. So I'm generally against the invasion. I think once you take out Assad, the rebel groups, none of them are like liberals. Like you have like really bad Islamists, and then you have the not so bad Islamists. But all you have is Islamists, and they're going to enforce a Sharia state where women are going to have to cover up, and gay people may be thrown off or put in jail or something like that. And it's going to be bad, and it's going to be as bad as Iraq, if not worse. So I mean, I'm generally just, Assad is a bad dude, but
We have a lot of bad
there's no
dudes in
good
this
person
country.
who's willing to take over from Assad.
Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, it's another bad, we only look at the other side and we only look at other country, but there is a lot of evil people in this country.
Well, I agree. I think our foreign policy has been one of the roots
Okay.
of
Well,
worst,
the thing is that, so, I'm sorry, the thing is that I completely agree with you, is that I remember maybe it was not past a couple of months, but she had a couple of professors that were not only criticizing any talk about intervention, but also they were saying that the first thing that when it comes to Syria and not getting involved with Russia is to not even just like not get into any intervention, but also just like to start talking about NATO and like the involvement of how we did that mainly to just provoke Russia and kind of put like corner them. So maybe in the past like couple of months she had like a pro-rebel thing. The thing about Amy Goodman or any kind of like journalism, it should be like you said, it should be about both sides. I'm not advocating necessarily for like Amy Goodman or Democracy Now!, I just think like nowadays we have very few outlets that actually cover every single issue that's happening in the world. To talk about the Western Saharan occupation, to talk about what they talked about and covered extensively Standing Rock. But the thing about, like he said, about Syria is that it's an unbelievably complicated issue that still to this day we know how it started. It was rooted, obviously, like any war on profits and oil and different agreements with like among allies and among people when it comes to like the U.S. interests. It got escalated to a lot more than just the rebels versus Assad. There's multiple people that are involved in, and I'm trying like it's not. I think the main competition not be pro-Assad or pro-rebels or against Assad or against rebels should be a lot more taking other players into consideration.
Well, if only Andrew Jackson had lived a little longer, he could have prevented the whole thing. Who knew it could be so complicated?
I just wanted to bring things back to the original reason for this panel. How do we reach people's hearts and minds? And
On the far right, or in general?
As a joke.
in general, I think people tend to use a very direct approach, which gets people's guards up, makes them defensive.
Yeah.
And it's not the best way to do it. And the best way is not necessarily a rational way, a reasoned way. What Pete Seeger showed with the Clearwater is if you want to clear up the environment, you get people involved in being in nature. And, he built the Clearwater sailing boat, if anybody who doesn't know it, formed this organization, and people had fun, and while on board, they did education, and they brought them into a culture of singing and just learning about the history of the river, and they got people together from all different ideologies to clean up the river and to put pressure on the polluters, and it had a huge impact.
It's a beautiful backstory.
So what I'm saying is that if you don't go directly at people in terms of, their ideologies, their, beliefs, and you bring people together to go kayaking, or you do it to, do something of interest that's fun, where they're relaxed, where they're comfortable, and their defenses are down, then you can bring things into it that will help to, transcend the normal boundaries, and suddenly you'll have conversations.
Yeah.
I did this once at a birthday party with a woman whose husband and she watched Fox News all the time. They were rigid ideologues, but I found out that she grew up in the Bronx, in Yonkers. And I happen to know that the Yonkers civil rights movement was hugely influential, and she was black. And I said, when the courts came in and changed the way Yonkers was run, it forced a desegregation policy on it. Didn't this make your life and life of the people who knew better? And she said, yeah. The big government has a role. It did good things.
Yeah.
And her husband freaked out. How dare you admit that? Let no facts get involved here. But it changed her heart, it changed her mind. Because she realized that was true.
This is a perfect example of what I was alluding to. It's brilliant. I love it.
As much as I love the Socratic method and Socratic debate, it does not work. And I don't know.
It doesn't always work.
It almost never works.
It's a good way to train and be about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for you if you can engage in Socratic debate with yourself. But Nietzsche's, he had a lot of things to say about Plato, but he once said that you have to find reason in reality, not rationality. Because we know scientifically, philosophically, that people are fundamentally not rational. And that is why we do need to engage both ideological supporters and ideological opponents in a way that doesn't garner a reaction of defensiveness, because that is how we increase polarization. So, growing up a millennial in the 90s when Fox first emerged, and coming from a Democratic household, and constantly hearing the term culture wars, I'm not sure, because I was a child at the time, the extent to which we really had a culture war, but now it's very obvious that it's full blown. And there really is no engagement unless the engagement resembles, in a verbal manner, that of warfare. And social media is usually the battlefield where people actually of different backgrounds discuss. But it doesn't look like a discussion because it looks like people trying to kill each other over their computer screens. The Facebook groups, and I say this, but I'm guilty of it myself. I'm in all these Bill Maher groups and yada yada yada, and what they tailor themselves to our tribalism, our innate tribalism that manifests politically or culturally, and nobody talks to anybody else unless it's to argue. And what I think one of the things we need to do if we're going to use the internet, while it's still relatively neutral, is that we need to use the internet to set up alternate exchange spaces, because exchange spaces in real time, as ideal as they may be, one of the biggest problems with the culture of this country is that we're geographically and politically polarized. So we have red states and we have blue states. We have Republican neighborhoods and we have Democratic neighborhoods. I did campaign work for Mike McMahon, the district attorney in Staten Island, and I didn't think we were going to win because Staten Island is overwhelmingly Republican. And I'd always heard that, but it wasn't until we were driving around and I saw all the signs on people's lawns that I realized the extent to which, and even after that, when you look at the post-electoral map, and Staten Island was completely red. And you realize the extent to which a borough of New York City could be that overwhelmingly conservative. So the actual prospect of us getting in a room and discussing things with people of the opposite political orientation is virtually impossible. So to some extent, there needs to be an attempt on social media to find a way to convince people to engage and do it in such a way that it in some way, shape, or form resembles this a collective, almost community building project. But we're going to have people, and I think economics is what we need to focus on, and that is one of the things that disheartens me the most about the left, is my generation, I feel, has overwhelmingly shadowed class issues with identity issues. And the one identity I don't see being represented is coming from a working class background. So there's this notion to talk about left dogma that I, who grew up in a middle class household, am inherently less privileged than a poor white person, which I do not think is the case. I think there are circumstances in which that may be the case, and there are circumstances in which there are not. So I would like to see a return to a conversation about class, which is very much an issue that can be empirically argued for. We have the data. We know that such a fraction of the population controls over 40% of the wealth. We know that unequivocally. Conservatives can't even begin to try to argue against that. But again, at the end of the day, you have Fox News convincing people that the sky is red. So they don't believe in climate change. They don't believe in a lot of the numbers. So we have to engage in a way that, again, is not purely scientific, is not purely Socratic, but again, emotionally effective communication in engaging initially in such a way that doesn't have people being defensive.
You should look at the way Bernie reached people. I mean,
That was great, yeah.
He reached people right in their guts,
He
and
did.
where they lived, how they lived.
Yeah.
You know, and people just loved it. The most popular politician, probably in history. I mean, or certainly current history. But I just want to raise one thing, and I don't want it to be discouraging, but it's something people should know about. I've read that the amount of internet traffic around the election, something like 40 or 50% of it was either paid trolls or bots. There's a huge amount of influence through a lot, heavy money that is taking the internet away from us. Not just by taking away internet neutrality, but just because there are people out there who literally are paid to take over these conversations and stop them to death, or to revile people to the point, with death threats and other things, that they withdraw.
I've had friends that have been victims of that. I think all of us have.
Yeah, trolling is big. I mean, I've been on many threads where someone comes in and says something crazy. It sparks an outraged reaction. It's just very bad, and it appeals to our naturalistic, animalistic tendencies. And what can you do about that? To censor the internet, or
it's even more nefarious than that, because some of these trolls are paid to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
Or they're bots. They're not even people.
And companies like Facebook and other ones are developing artificial intelligence and algorithms to kind of put certain things in your feed to nudge you a certain way on the way they think you would. And so a scary future that is already in a sense happening, but will only get worse, is a customized internet, whereas your internet is different from mine. I Google something, yours is totally different. You get different things on your page list, I get different things. And the things that show up on me are the things that the algorithm thinks I'm most likely to click on or most likely to like, but that could also be used to kind of nudge me in political directions. Like, just give me a little bit of nudge, get me to move a little bit closer to this issue or that issue, and it can be customized for everyone. And who knows in the future what can be done with this kind of technology. You could deliberately polarize people as much as they want, or you could move millions of people in certain directions politically, psychologically, by customizing the internet for them. And I don't know, that's just, and the thing is, what's going to be driving that, of course, is money and sales. And if you can make more money by dividing people and getting them to be outraged and turning them into trolls, then capitalism will win out. And so you have talks at MIT and all these big universities now about, like, the ethics behind these kinds of algorithms. Let's nudge people in such a way that it's like ethical, or we don't get them to be, too much. And it's a whole big new ethical discussion that's going on now. I have no idea what the solution is for that. I do think that you got to have ethics, and you got to have people on ethics panels informing Zuckerberg and all these other companies and Amazon, all these big internet companies and Google, to kind of make sure that we don't go crazy with this kind of manipulation of the mind through
Without a
algorithms.
strong FCC, there's no control.
One of the solutions be actual, this kind of going into an change of the economic system. Because the reason why we have all of this, like for-profits, like fake news or trolls and all of that, is because we're living in a for-profits economic system. Not to make it like all like of course there's like different issues, but like if we had a system where everything wasn't modeled at a capitalistic way, it was all for-profits and having to like just get as much money as possible, or like making it into becoming one of those 1%ers and make it about just consumerism and money.
What do you think about
then
some
it could
of these European countries have like a hybrid where you have free markets, but you also have a firm wall, a better wall between special interests and money and elites in public sector, so you don't have money playing this central role, hijacking all these different spheres. So do you think you can retain a free enterprise system while still being more modeled on parts of Europe where they have this wall of separation?
What do you mean, like free market? What?
I mean, do you see this as a binary between, say, top-down government control versus total capitalism, or is there somewhere in the middle where you can say,
I mean, that's the thing is like we can't just like keep going back and forth to just like two systems. These are just two systems that like have been happening in the past 200 years. So the only thing to go forward from here is just move on to a different system.
Well, certainly, yes.
The transition period would be very difficult as to how you get from capitalism, the kind of capitalism we have now, to maybe a more kind of a liberal capitalistic model, and to a kind of a more, I don't know, what takes over. There's a guy called Peter Joseph who did the Zeitgeist documentaries. He has this. He's got some kooky conspiracy theory ideas, but he has this idea of a resource-based economy where it's just, eventually in the future, machines are going to be doing all the menial labor. And you will only need a small group of people to maintain the machines. And so you can have 90% of your year free you're doing whatever the hell you want. The machines are doing all the work for you. And 10% of the year you work for the machines to maintain them, and we rotate out like that. And so that's a kind of system that we have. And nobody makes anything for the purpose of selling it, because you don't need money. Because your home is built by machines, your food is prepared by machines, everything is done by machines. There's no reason to pay anybody for labor to do anything. Machines will do that.
Star Trek
and
shit.
you just rotate to maintain the machines every so often. So that's a possible future that's we don't have a monetary system. But that's probably going to be 50 or more years away. You need something in the meantime. I don't know. I don't have the solution for that. It's an interesting idea, though. I like the idea.
Guaranteed basically will be better for free conservatives who like free markets than our current capitalist system. Is our current system, like our current capitalism, is bad for capitalism as people want to see it. So anyone who wants free markets should want fundamental change in our system. I think that's everyone.
I think our society hasn't admitted that we are moving in that direction, that there are less and less jobs because there's more and more productivity, more and more automation. Our country doesn't even seem to be able to talk about issues that are extremely important like that. Instead, what we do is we have a jobs program called the Military Industrial Complex that we put 20% of our federal budget into every year, making bombs and missiles and things that can only be used to kill people, and so people might wonder why we have so many wars. Well, we got to do something with all these things that the congressmen don't want to stop making because they lose jobs in their districts. So it's really a big jobs program, $600 billion a year. Most people have no idea how much we can spend on it. The voters just keep voting for it because they want to vote for the politicians that tell them we want a strong defense.
Right.
No one has any idea how much money we spend, and our TV media doesn't want to tell anybody because they're all part of it. So, well, anyway, another thing I wanted to say was there's something I go to every year down in Washington where we lobby Congress, and it's about 1,000 Christians come together every year, people just like this. It's called the Ecumenical Advocacy Days Conference. So I just want to say there are some Christians that are trying to follow Jesus, but I know there's a lot of fundamentalist Christians that have been brainwashed, mainly by Karl Rove has realized that there are some people who like to see things black and white, and there's some Christians who like to see things that way. I think it's a personality thing more than anything, and they've kind of co-opted that whole group of Christians, and the media makes us think that all the Christians are like that, but I'm one Christian that's not. I try to do what we're all trying to do here, so
Great example.
we don't want to fight each other on that either.
No, that's a great example of how propaganda is.
Us atheists, we also have a yearly lobby day that we all go down to DC for.
With torches.
Yeah, pretty much.
Join forces, you'd be twice as strong.
Well, we actually do work with a lot of secular religious groups. Our big focus is secularism, the total separation of church and state. Getting churches out of politics who actually don't approve of what you're doing, because I don't want anyone else to have that example that people can go because of their Christianity and talk to their politicians under the flag of Christianity. People should go as citizens. That's it.
Well, I think that's what he's doing.
It depends on what you're advocating for. If you're advocating for decent secular policies, I don't care if you're a Christian doing it or a Muslim doing it or an atheist doing it, or even if the whole group is one particular way. I don't have mine. If you guys are going down there and advocating for universal health care, I don't care whether you're a Christian doing it or Muslim or an atheist or whatever. So it doesn't matter to me necessarily. So I wouldn't be against that group necessarily.
My problem is that they're taking away the tax-exempt limit on political work in the churches, so that even though the churches are tax-exempt, they should have been limited in their political work. They're now removing that limitation. They can now advocate for, Trump or whoever they want to advocate for in the churches and still get tax exemption.
And the scary thing about that, the really scary thing about that is church tax exemption is different from nonprofit tax exemption.
Right.
Church tax exemption means they don't have to report anything.
Right.
Nonprofits, you still have to show what's coming in and going out. Churches, not a cent. So you're really opening up the can of worms that we don't know how bad the damage is going to be from that, but it's going to be bad.
Are you going to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to go back to what the gentleman said about Bernie. I think Bernie had a lot of success, especially with the young people. And being that the millennials are a group that they haven't seen what we have seen, people that we are 40 or 50 years old, older than that, and what we have experienced during the year administration. And remember, a lot of the things that is happening here now are things that were actually implemented by Reagan, and you could just go on. Like I was talking yesterday to somebody, and we were talking about what Trump just did about getting out of the Paris
Peace Accords.
Yeah. So. And if you remember, some of us will remember that one of the things that Reagan did was they took this solar panel out of the White House. So if you remember that was the beginning of what is happening right now. Why all these people are denying the climate change and all this. And if you go back to the Reagan administration, then you see the privatization, the destruction of unions, and all these different things happened during that time. And there were things that they were set up back then, and now the implementation is now, because they sit and wait. And what I wanted to say about going back to Bernie is that the reason being because these young people this millennium, they don't have all these things that we have in our head, that we have experienced to some. For Bernie, it's very easy to gravitate to this group of people, because if you notice, another thing that Bernie didn't have a lot of Latinos and African American. So that's another group. Yes, we are divided. We are very, very divided, because one of the things that divide us is about, when they talk about the middle class, they don't talk about the Latinos middle class, they don't talk about the black middle class, they only talk about white middle class. So we are being left out, we are being pushed to the side. So one of the things that I think that it should be, how we could bring people to the movement, is to talk about our own family. It's about trying to get these people to convince them. And on my side, I would say it would be, I just came from one of those workshops about Venezuela, and one of the things that we're having really hard trouble with is in the Latino community believing everything that is being said about Venezuela on the Spanish channel. So right now, my job is to try to talk to my family and to try to, and it's very hard. It's very hard because all these lies, all these alternative facts that are being given about Venezuela and the rest of the United States, how we're being lied about all these things is based on the Facts Channel 5, Fox News. So we have to look at our own home and trying to bring, and I'm talking about Caucasian, trying to talk, because look, I noticed this year, I don't see as many people that I saw last year. I could be wrong, but I thought last year was a little bit more people here. A lot of more people.
Yeah.
So I'm a little.
And you would think there'd be more because of Trump's election,
No,
right?
I thought it would be double.
It's because of Trump's election that there are less.
Yeah.
A lot of people have given up hope.
Or so depressed they can't get out of bed.
Oh, you're not kidding. That's literally something that is happening right now.
I had a question. How would you define, what's your definition of religion?
What do you mean?
Anything he disagrees with.
No, it's like, I wanted to talk about just what your...
The way I
how would
define,
you
or the way I use the
religion?
word religion is to
You
define
mentioned like Christianity, Islam, like any religion.
any belief system that requires a supernatural element.
Any belief system, okay. And what were the first things that would be most problematic to you that stems from supernatural belief?
There is no supernatural that's problematic.
No, digging into every day, like in your, how is that influencing, society?
If you can be
From your
duped
point of
into
view.
believing something is outside right now that doesn't exist.
Maybe I can answer for you. Okay. There was some politician on the right to say we don't need to worry about climate change because God will deal with it. I guess that would be a real example of how someone's religious beliefs can have a real negative effect on public policy, which could affect all of us.
Or God
Is that what you were asking for?
Yes.
Or that you could do the same thing on abortion, you could do the same thing on gay marriage, you could do the same thing on women's rights. Go down the line of all the social issues. You could always just say, God doesn't want us to do X, therefore I'm making X illegal.
But the thing is that when you live in secular, like a separation of church and state, and you can't argue. Like, for example, I would agree with you that we need complete separation between religion and society and state. However, your point was that as a Christian, it diminishes you with talking about to lobby to a politician because you happen to be Christian or because Muslim, or whatever.
Lobbying as a group under a religious flag is one thing. Lobbying as a private citizen is something else entirely. That was the point I was trying to make.
But what would be the difference between how would an action of a person that identifies themselves as religious and that identity would be any different than someone who isn't?
Well, I mean, it's the
if
core.
they're doing the same thing.
It's the core issue of the separation of church and state. You don't want your religion influencing your government. You don't want your government influencing your religion. So people are coming to influence your government under the flag of religion.
Okay, hold on.
This is jump in?
Yeah, here's the way in America how we've decided. There's a thing called the lemon test, right? There's 3 prongs there. In order for a law to be constitutional, it has to neither advance nor inhibit a religion. It cannot mingle with religion too much. And there's a 3rd one I totally forgot right now. But you could be a Christian and say, my religion, informs me to want to advocate for X. But if in order for that policy, for X to be constitutional, there has to be a secular justification for it. You can't just say, religion says X is wrong, therefore we should make it a law. You have to give a secular argument for why is it wrong. Does it harm people? Does it increase infant mortality? Is it bad for the environment? You have to give a non-religious justification for the law. And so you can be a Christian and lobby, and you could be a Christian and be a politician, but the thing is, when you're enacting a law, there has to be a secular justification for it. You can't just say, God wants me to do X, or the Bible says X, or the Quran says X.
That's the definition of the separation between church and state. That's the whole point of this creation of this country in the first place. However, the thing is that we can't, separation of church and state and religious freedom they're not mutually exclusive. So when you talk about religion as being problematic, it's the same. Talking about an ideology that people will be. It's not just about supernatural. It's not something it's not necessarily that, but it's a emotional based ideology. An ideology that, for whatever reason, a person is following it, whether they're Buddhist or anything, and anything is. Because I would argue that even atheism is a kind of religion.
No, it's not. Atheism is as much a religion as it's a TV channel.
A religion is an ideology.
Atheism is not an ideology.
How about this? What if we were to say, this could be a basis for a movement, all policies by the government should have to answer to the weight of evidence. Here's one example of a system I think we'll all agree is founded on superstitious bullshit. Drug war and a lot of aspects of our justice system are based on unfounded emotional claims that absolutely need to answer to the weight of it. Jeff Sessions should have to publicly answer to the weight of evidence. How effective is mandatory minimums for marijuana users in low-income neighborhoods? Are there alternative justice models that actually are more effective? If there are, we have to start basing policies on the facts. If we did that, we would fundamentally see an end to our prison-industrial complex the way it currently is. So I think pushing for evidence-based policies, period, could be a way to bring people together. The deeper idea here I think he's alluding to is that unfounded claims without evidence pushed through public policy are bad. Let's find an area where people agree across race and across political dogma, which is justice system, justice reform. That's a really good area.
I mean, just so one thing going back, the history of church-state separation has to do with the institutional church. Okay, it has to do with the Pope and the influence of the Pope and the institutional church over the ages. And people lobbying under the banner of Christianity has nothing at all to do with the institutional church.
Depends on which church they're lobbying with.
It's a Jeffersonian argument.
If the church itself goes to Congress and says, tries to pressure it to do something, that is the reason for the separation of church and state. And it's not individual voters going who happen to be evangelicals or anything else. It has to do with the power of the institutional church, which is massive.
Yes, I completely agree. I wasn't making the argument that if you are a Christian, you can't go lobby. I was saying under a flag of that religion, of that church, of that thing, you should not be allowed to do that.
See, I totally disagree with it.
But what if it, as your religious ideology, not necessarily, not even the major religions, happen to be aligning with a secular, separate entity from religion and church, a policy that actually aligns with an atheist? How would that be? How would that be problematic? Just because it was an ideology, it's the same set of beliefs. Like you can't interject fact that just because it happens to be supernatural or not or whatever. Because to me, like a religion is belief, like it's not necessarily something supernatural. It's not necessarily something like not based on science or is. Like you have a lot of religions that have different interpretations and interpretations that actually could, for a person, could align with scientific data. However, dismissing an entire ideology because a particular group that has belief in supernatural.
I agree with your position. I totally disagree with your definition of religion. If we take the supernatural out of religion, it's not religion. Like in discourse alone, when we say something is a religion, we're generally, like every once in a while we use that word pejoratively. That is usually, when it is used pejoratively, is to insert that an ideology has a set of beliefs and epistemology that has no real logical or empirical basis. So by conventional definition, by discourse, when we employ the term religion, we're talking about a set of beliefs that are codified that answer certain fundamental questions about the nature of reality, the nature of humanity, that do not consult science. Now sure, every once in a while there's congruence, but that's complete coincidence. Not only is it coincidence, but it's usually an attempt to try to make the religion look scientific. You know, I was handed out a pamphlet by a young man in Union Square that tried to take verses from the Quran and then say, well, here's geology, and here's physics, and here's chemistry, and here's where they match up. And I gave the thing the time of day, and it was not cogent, to say the least. That being said, where I disagree with Lee is on this topic, which is how to counter the far-right insurgency. My concern would be that telling Christians you cannot, as Christians, lobby in Washington may make them think Christianity is under attack. And if Christianity is under attack, I need to be on the right, because those are the people who believe Christianity is under attack. So me personally, I like to advocate what I call a switchfoot Christian, which that was, a popular rock band in the early 2000s.
Remember that, yeah.
They had very progressive social commentary, deep philosophical lyrics. And if I could, wave my hand and you say some magical stuff and get half of American Christians to have a worldview that's compatible with switchfoot lyrics, first of all, we wouldn't be here. Because Mike Pence and friends they'd be exiled. They'd be in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean right now. But that's what I would like to see. Kind of the way Sam Harris wants to see an Islamic reformation. I would prefer to see a Christian reformation. As opposed to, we did, but Mike Pence's type. I jokingly refer to Handmaid's Tale is Mike Pence's paradise, he wants to return. I actually rewrote the lyrics to Gangsta's Paradise entirely about Mike Pence. But in any case, it's really funny, I promise. But they want to return us to a 17th century Puritanism. So it's like, yeah, we had a Reformation, but evangelical Christians, in their response to the 60s and the 70s, in the Reagan administration, really want to go back way further than the 50s that they say that they didn't want to take us back. So if a bunch of private citizens come together because they are Christians and because they are following the example of Christ in the canonical Gospels, for one, I don't think it's such a dangerous precedent because I think the first Christians to really go to Washington were the evangelical conservatives. So I see it as the opposite. I see progressive Christians in Washington doing whatever it is that they're doing to be a reaction to the conservative ones. And those are the ones that I want. I would hate to lose people on a progressive cause because they feel as though they can't be progressive and under a banner of Christianity.
Hey, his gay conversion therapy really helped me. I don't want you to tell me.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, in my view, the way secularism works in the United States of America is you can lobby the government under any banner you want. You could lobby it under ISIS if you could get away with it somehow. But what you're lobbying for must be justified secularly. You know, if you could be a pro-life Christian church lobbying the government, but you cannot make arguments to enact a pro-life position unless your arguments are secular. That's the way it is. So you can be Christian, you can be Muslim, you can be Buddhist, you can lobby the government at any time you want. But what you're lobbying for has to have a legitimate secular justification for it. You cannot say, my God says X, therefore we need to pass this law. You have to say, well, X does this, it does that. You have to come up with scientific, empirical kind of arguments. Then it can be passed. That's what you have to do.
Our policies are based on empirical arguments.
Actually, no, not really.
They should be.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to give some perspective. I'm sorry. People may not know this, but the civil rights movement was based in black churches. Without the black churches, the civil rights movement would not have happened. It was not only a base of strength and support within the community, but most of the leaders of the civil rights movement were reverends and other leaders of the church. And to say that they didn't have a legitimate interest and involvement in politics and social change would be ridiculous. So, I think it's something that has been lost to history, and it's really important to understand that they changed the way America exists because they, by especially the Baptist churches, they were able to maintain solidarity, mutual support through the bus boycott and all the rest of it.
Yeah, the anti-war movement was literally based on getting, on morality that stemmed from religious stems.
Sure. That was a different time, though. We live in a time now where the evangelical church says, well, we're all coming together on religious values, and gay people should be, executed, thrown away, tortured.
Most people don't say that.
That's the noise. That is what is getting through. That is the loudest voice in the room. That is how religion is being looked upon and judged, because that's all we're hearing anymore. I don't hear the liberal Christians telling everyone to be compassionate. I can't hear them over the ones that say we fucking hate gay people. That's the world we live in now, and that's the problem we have to deal with. And those same people are telling their people to vote Donald Trump, to vote Mike Pence, and to never criticize them because they're God's chosen candidates.
I think in terms of the left-right divide, we can all agree, obviously, the Republican Party is funded by people like the Koch brothers, Big Oil, and Wall Street. And, I think that we also can agree that the Republican Party leadership made a conscious effort to insert religious and social issues into the center of our politics in order to obviously appeal to a base